Forged in Fire podcast. Be warned, we're not your typical Christian podcast. We tell it like it is, we don't pull punches, and we're committed to teaching biblical truth even when that truth hurts your feelings. Sensitive listener discretion is advised. Let's rock. Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind, and said, Who is this that darkeneth counsel by words without knowledge? Gird up now thy loins like a man, for I will demand of thee, and answer thou me. Where wast thou when I laid the foundations of the earth? Declare, if thou hast understanding. Job 38, verses 1 through 4. Hello and welcome back to Forged in Fire podcast. Thank you so much for downloading or streaming. Thank you for being here for the show and joining me today. I'm Matt, your host, and we are going to wrap up the why part of our series today with a look at what is arguably the hardest pill to swallow in this particular bottle. I was going to subtitle this episode, I don't know, but I couldn't figure out how to spell it. Then I very clearly heard God laugh, and then my mother's voice gave me this week's focus or subtitle, if you will, and that is, Because I Said So. Now, man, brings back some memories. Because I Said So was arguably the most hated phrase of my entire childhood. I spent my life, and I'm not exaggerating, swearing up, down, left, right, and center that I would never, ever say that to my own children when I grew up. I must have heard that phrase from my mother at least 3 times a week while I was a kid, and it would just tick me off to a point that I really didn't have words for it. And I would tell myself again and again and again and just over and over and over again, I would never, ever grow up and say that to my own kids. Well, let's fast forward a little while. When I grew up, in my first marriage, I fathered 3 children. I am now in my second marriage, and we are a blended family with 5 children. Anybody want to guess how well I've kept to that promise? Pretty much, yeah. Now, to be fair, truth be told, I did keep it until my oldest and at the time only child, she was about 3 years old. And then suddenly she entered that stage where she wanted to know everything there was to know about absolutely everything. And not only did she figure that I was the one who could tell her everything about everything, but that the best way to accomplish this goal was to ask me why about everything that was said to her about 367 times a day. I mean, it wore me down. I liken it to like one of those, what do they call them? The brute force algorithms that just keep pounding and pounding and pounding to crack codes. And eventually I could not take it anymore. Now, I don't remember exactly what the last straw was. I can't remember what she was asking why about. I think it was like cleaning up her room or picking up toys or something like that. But what I do remember is that I looked at her and I said, because I said so, that's why. And then I said, ew. I was in complete shock because I had not intended to say that, but it just kind of happened. I opened my mouth and my mother's voice came out, and it was a devastating experience that I still have not fully recovered from. Ugh, give me the willies just thinking about it. Now meaning today, we have 5 children in our house. There are 3 boys, 2 girls. Their ages are 14, 13, 10, 8, and 6. And so we probably say, because I said so, a dozen times a week. And I still don't like it, though. I still cringe at the sound of those words leaving my mouth. But I have finally reached a point in my life where I understand why my parents said that to me and why we today as parents say it to our children. And there are 3 main reasons, okay? And as I get into these, I want to remind you of what we talked about last week, is the fact that it's easy to lose sight of the fact that God is our Father. Okay. And the reason I bring this up is because our relationship with him mirrors in a lot of ways, and should in all ways, that's the ultimate goal at least, our parents' relationship with us and our relationship with our own children. So as we go through this, just kind of bear that in mind, okay? Go ahead, let's take a look and break down the three main reasons why we say because I said so, rather than actually providing an explanation. Reason number one, sometimes it's because our kids either wouldn't understand the explanation or that it simply wouldn't matter. Okay, now, as an example of this, we're going to look at Exodus 3 once more, but we've already kind of covered this in depth. Not super depth, but it was the focus of an episode a few weeks back, so I'm just going to kind of go through the Cliff Notes version of this. Okay, is basically when God appeared to Moses as the burning bush that would not, burn, like it was burning, but it wouldn't burn up. God told him, hey, I'm going to send you to Pharaoh in Egypt. You tell him to let my people go. And Moses said, well, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh, that I should bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? And God said, I will be with you. This is a token. This is how you know it, is that when you bring the Jews out of the land of Egypt, you will come to this mountain and you will worship me here. And Moses says, well, who should I say sent them? And God, I am sent me. And they won't believe me. Well, here's a few miracles to do. Here's another miracle to do. Well, I don't talk that good. Well, Aaron does. I'll send him. Okay, so you see the point here as we go through this. We've broken it down before. Moses got an explanation for what God had called him to do. Okay, he got a ton of explanation. But at every step of the way, that explanation and the setting of expectations didn't matter. It was never enough. And so it says in Exodus 4:14 that the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses. And that was when he said, well, isn't Aaron the Levite your brother? That's when he sent Aaron with Moses to be the speaker, because, Moses' last excuse before he just broke down with, please send somebody else, was, I don't talk good. Tough, whatever. Sometimes we fall into the same boat, is that, we're dealing with issues in our lives, and, again, we want to know why. We're driven by the need to understand. And sometimes there's not an explanation. And so that was really kind of where the focus of this week began, with the simple fact that, yes, you are going to have issues in your life, but there's not always going to be a clear-cut reasoning or understanding behind why. And so it basically boils down to, because I said so, being God, from God's point of view, is because I said so. We're not always going to get that explanation. Sometimes we're just going to get, because I'm God and I said so. And that is frustrating. I know it's frustrating. I've been there, done that, got the t-shirt, sent it back. It's super frustrating. And really, it can make you angry. It can be frustrating. But it's just part of the deal. It really doesn't matter. It's just another one of those instances that exist to kind of force you, really, like the Israelites being led through the wilderness, force you to lean on God and to trust in His plan and His understanding and His knowledge, and more importantly, His power and His strength, instead of your own, because your own is insufficient. Period. For whatever it is you're facing, you can't, you might say, oh, I got this. No, you don't got this. Your strength is not enough on its own. And so it's times like this where we have no choice. We have to lean into God, because the explanation of why we're going through whatever these issues are that we're going to is just not enough. And so we have to lean on Him and just put our trust in Him. And again, that's one of those things that's much easier said than done. But show me a place in Scripture that says it's easy to follow the Lord. I read a quote just a few weeks ago that said, salvation costs you nothing, but discipleship will cost you everything. And that's true, and that's very, very powerful, because see, salvation it's free. It's this free gift, that is this gift of grace and mercy that is given to us, that we don't deserve, that we're not even close to being worthy of. But it's there for the taking if we believe that Christ is who he said he is. Period. If we believe that he is the Son of the living God, and that he died on the cross to pay the penalty for our sins and was resurrected from the dead 3 days later. That's it. That's all it takes. It's free. But discipleship, the following, is what will cost you everything. And that's not just material or physical things. That's mentally as well. It's going to cost you stress and frustration and fear sometimes. But that's all a part of it. And remember, once more, like we said last week, all things, the good, the bad, and the ugly, all, A-L-L, every single bit of it, all things work together for good for those that love God. So let's move on to number 2. Sometimes there's no time for an explanation. Okay, if we look in the first chapter of Mark, in verses 17 and 18, it says, "And Jesus said to them, 'Come after me, and I will make you fishers of men.' And straightway they forsook their nets and followed him." Straightway means immediately in the King's English, okay, in the King James Version. And the very next verses, when he gone a little further, he saw James the son of Zebedee and John his brother, who were also in the ship mending their nets. And straightway he called them, and they left their father in the ship with the hired servants, and they went after him. Immediately. There was no... Jesus' public ministry, it was a ministry on the move. There was no time for lollygagging. You know, it was, hey, come on, follow me. And that was it. That was all she wrote. They picked up, and they went along after him. We look into Hebrews chapter 11. The writer there tells us that by faith Noah, being warned of God of things not seen as yet, moved with fear, prepared an ark to the saving of his house, by the which he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness which is by faith. The key part here is moved with fear. If you are moving away from something with fear, something that you are afraid of, you're probably running. Okay, you're moving pretty quick. This was an immediate action. It had to be, because, I mean, this was a big job for a dude who was 600 years old. You know what I'm saying? And the next verse again, by faith, Abraham, when he was called to go out into a place which he would receive after for an inheritance, obeyed, and he went out not knowing whither he went. Straightway, Abraham followed God's instructions. Straightway. There was no time for an explanation. It was, you're going to go to a land that I'm going to show you. I'm going to make you a great nation, a father of many nations. Your seed's going to be like the grains of sand on the beach. Let's go. Let's roll. That was it. And he went. And these are the pillars of faith, the icons of, you know, strong, stalwart faith that we're supposed to follow. And they just, man, they moved quickly. They moved quickly. There's just no time for lollygagging around for an explanation. Now, to put that into real world context, real world, air quotes, let me be upfront, as I am wont to do, and tell you that this is a big one at my house. Okay, when we say, because I said so at my house, it's usually because we just don't have time to explain why we're telling you to do what we're telling you to do. Okay, now the way that I explain this to my kids is as follows. Okay, just bear with me. This, I believe, will show you a main difference between myself and my wife. Here's how I explain this to my kids. This idea of just do it, there's no time to explain. In the event of a zombie apocalypse, probably didn't see that coming, did you? But in the event of a zombie apocalypse, I will not be explaining my orders and directions to you. Period. I will speak once. You will listen. If you do not, you will be left behind. Because I'm not going to let all of us die because you want to stop in the middle of hell on earth and play 20 questions. Now, I'm aware that that is harsh, and somebody probably just got mad about that, okay? But two things. Number one, I don't rightly care. And number two, it's just a joke. Mostly. But my wife has a much more serious, useful, and, air quotes again, real world scenario to break this down for the kids. And that is, if you get into the street and we see a semi-truck barreling down toward you and you don't, and we say, hey, get out of the road, or hey, move, and you just stand there and go, why? You're going to get run over. It'll be over. Done. Okay, in the words of Mr. Miyagi, it squish just like grape. That was not a great Mr. Miyagi impersonation. Rest in peace, Mr. Morita. I will concede that these are harsh explanations, but the point is to get the point across, is that we don't always have the time to give you a breakdown of reasons why we're telling you to do something. And in the right, or I guess really the wrong scenario, depending on, the scenario, that can have very real, very serious, and very dangerous consequences. Now on to reason number 3, and this is that really hard pill to swallow that I mentioned in the beginning, is the simple fact that sometimes we as parents don't owe our children an explanation. And guess what? God doesn't always owe us one either. We're telling you to do something, you do it. End of story. That's all she wrote. No further discussion needed. And the best example of this in Scripture that we find comes in Job chapter 38. Now, this is the point where Job has finally broken down and is asking and demanding answers, wanting to know why this is happening to him. So we're going to look, this is going to come out of the English Standard Version here as we go through. We're just going to kind of break this down, because what you're going to see is that God answers Job, but he really doesn't. He does, but the answer that he gives Job is not the one that he was looking for. Okay, so Job 38, starting at verse 1. The Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Dress for action like a man. I will question you, and you make it known to me. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Now that, of course, again, I don't know how many more times I'm going to say this. When God asks a question, it's rhetorical. He already knows the answer. That's not a genuine inquiry on God's part. It is rhetorical. It is meant to make Job think, well, where was I when God I wasn't around yet. I wasn't even a thought. And moving on in verse 5, God says, who determined its measurements? Surely you know. Or who stretched the line upon it? The answer to these questions, again, is God. On what were its bases sunk? Or who laid its cornerstone? God. When the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God sounded for joy. Or who shut in the sea with doors when it burst out from the womb? God. When I made clouds its garment and thick darkness its swaddling band, and prescribed limits for it and set bars and doors, and said, thus far shall you come and no further, and here shall your proud waves be stayed. That's all God. It's not Job. And in the midst of all this, though, Job's not getting a simple, straight answer. He's not getting a satisfactory explanation for why these horrible, just heart-wrenching things have happened to him. He's not getting an answer. What he's getting is essentially a comparison between God and himself, showing how insignificant he is next to the power of the Lord. God continues to ask questions. Where is the way to the dwelling of light? Where's the place of darkness? Have you entered the storehouses of the snow, or seen the storehouses of the hail? Can you bind the chains of the Pleiades, or loose the cords of Orion? Can you lift up your voice to the clouds, that a flood of waters may cover you? Of course, the answer to this is no. No. He can't. Because he's only a man. Job chapter 40, verse 1. And the Lord said to Job, shall a fault finder contend with the Almighty? He who argues with God, let him answer it. And then Job answered the Lord and said, Hear this. Hear it, hear it, hear it. Keep this. That's not what Job said. I'm telling you to keep this. Job answered him after this whole onslaught of all of these questions and comparisons from God, when Job was demanding to know why. It's like, you owe me some answers. God's answer was, I'm God and you're not. No, I don't. And Job answered him and said, Behold, I am of small account. What shall I answer you? I lay my hand on my mouth. I've spoken once, and I will not answer. Twice, but I will proceed no further. He had nothing to say. There was nothing that he could say. And so the back and forth proceeds into chapter 41, and in the closing there in chapter 42, Job answers the Lord again and says, I know you can do all things, and no purpose of yours can be thwarted. Who is this that hides counsel without knowledge? Therefore I have uttered, and this is like the key take-home phrase from this week. Therefore I have uttered what I did not understand, things too wonderful for me which I did not know. He couldn't understand it. He couldn't. Trying to was futile. And this is a really hard pill for us to swallow. Because again, we want to know everything. We want to feel like we can understand everything. And on top of the nature of our relationship with God, one thing that's really easy to lose focus of is the fact that by definition, by essence of who he is, God is infinite. And an infinite being cannot be fully understood or comprehended by a finite mind, a mind with limits such as ours has. Doesn't work. See, we want to take God down and shrink him down and shape him into, more like we want to create God in our image and fit him into this little box that we can look at and understand and explain and break down. And we lose sight of the fact that that's just not the way that it works. That's not the way that it works. That is where faith is faith. That's why it's called faith. Because if you could understand it, if everything could be broken down, quantified, if it could all be known with 100% certainty, it wouldn't be faith. And that's where the faith comes in. And the same in these situations where we're going through terrible things. Our marriage is falling apart, our job is falling apart, our home is falling apart. Maybe our home life is falling apart, or the physical building, the structure itself is falling apart around us. Maybe, I don't know, death, destruction, whatever you're dealing with. We want to look at it and we want to figure out why. And we want God to tell us why, and we want to understand it. And the bottom line is sometimes you're not gonna. Bad grammar, okay? But it's a good observation. Sometimes you're not gonna. And that sucks, and we don't like that. We have a really hard time handling that, but having a hard time handling it doesn't make it less true. And so the best way to handle situations like that and that revelation is really all that you can do is through prayer. That is when you lean on God the most. They say, and it's true, is that it's real easy to pray when you're already on your knees. And so I want to encourage you in whatever it is that you're dealing with, whether you know the reason why, maybe you did something stupid you shouldn't have done and now it hurts. Now you're paying for it. Maybe you're being corrected. Maybe you're being chastised. Maybe you're being prepared. Or maybe you don't have a clue. Maybe it doesn't make sense. Whatever the case may be, I want to encourage you just to lean on God, and instead of asking for reasons why, just ask him for his presence and his strength and his grace and his comfort. And those things, I guarantee you will have. Now, does that mean that in the blink of an eye, whatever you're dealing with is going to be gone? Absolutely not. No. But again, that's the peace that surpasses understanding. That's where that comes in. These things are all very, very real. And I know I've kind of gone off the script a little bit today. I even feel kind of out of my usual element, but I'm like, I'm struggling with words as to just how important this is. If you just knew, it's like if I could take my brain and plug your brain into it to share experiences and feeling and just really intimately share this with you, I would do it in a heartbeat, because this is one of the biggest stumbling blocks and most dangerous stumbling blocks for Christians today, because they, again, we're fed this constant gotta make them feel good BS is what it is, about how great life is supposed to be and God's got great plans and this, that, and the other. Yes, he does. But see, here's the thing is that sometimes God's great plans for your life involve some periods of time that are the opposite of great. That are going to suck really hard, that are going to be painful, going to be difficult. But all of it works together for good for those who love God. And so in those moments, we need to lean on him, and instead of asking why and saying, God, tell me why this is happening, we need to say, God, help me get through this while it's happening. And he will. Well, guys, that's going to go ahead and wrap it up for this week. Again, I want to thank you so much for either downloading and listening to the show, whether it's audio or if you're checking us out on YouTube. Again, our numbers are starting to grow. We're beginning to build an audience, and I am incredibly thankful and grateful that you choose to spend your time listening to me. In the meantime, keep your eye on the website, forgedandfirepodcast.org. Up there's everything. There's a full feed from our homepage on Anchor, which is the podcasting platform that hosts the show. There's also a full video gallery from YouTube. There are blog posts. Blog posts. I don't really know what else to call it. Just a short little article, probably take 3 or 4 minutes to read, that I put together the other day about the importance of and how to spend time with God. I'm going to give you a little clip. Get up earlier than you usually do. Just do it. Get up. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, prayer requests, anything whatsoever, looking to partner up, anything at all that I can help in any capacity, that is what I'm here to do. And I'm more than happy to do that. So shoot me an email at forgedandfirepodcast@gmail.com. And until next time, spread the word, tell your friends, take care of yourselves, and God bless. Thanks, guys. Thank you for joining us here at Forged in Fire Podcast. We know there are thousands of options out there, and we're thankful you've chosen to spend your time with us. We hope you've been encouraged and strengthened in your walk with God, and encourage you to leave a review on Anchor, iTunes, or wherever you listen to this show. Opening music is Aliens on the Loose by Bobby Cole, which can be licensed at songtrader.com. Questions, comments, prayer requests, or hate mail can all be sent to forgedandfirepodcast@gmail.com or on our website at forgedandfirepodcast.org.